Okay, so interaction within a video. We can actually do some things using a program called Articulate Storyline, and throughout the history of education there's been various programs that have allowed these sorts of things to happen. So they're typically quite powerful programs, they typically cost a lot of money, they often have a very steep learning curve, which is why we won't be using them in class at all. Articulate's one of the more recent ones, which is moving away from Flash, which you may be familiar with lots of animations and lots of learning things which you can find easily online, to HTML5. And this is really important for one reason, and the fact that Flash has got a number of security issues. Apple has moved completely away from supporting Flash, and there's rumblings from many other quarters that Flash won't be able to be supported by future iterations of operating systems. Whereas HTML5 has greater security, it also has greater versatility moving from device to device. So an HTML5 implementation will run effectively on a desktop and a mobile device at the same time, whereas Flash might be a little bit more difficult to do, particularly as a lot of mobile devices no longer support it. So HTML5 is a good thing. If you're looking at programs that you want to use for education, look for things that look for HTML5. If you see Flash, just be really careful about how you might choose to proceed. As I said, programs like this do cost a fair bit of money. Okay. So Articulate, let's have a look. It's a tool that's designed to provide an interactive learning experience for users. It's visually based. It uses text, animations, all the sorts of things you'd expect to see in multimedia programs. It's relatively sophisticated, and it is specifically compliant in a certain way called SCORM compliance, which can be put into most learning management systems. The problem with that, and Articulate is undoubtedly going to be written around this, is that SCORM is no longer the best standard. You're looking for things that have LTI interactivity. So, first things first, you need to pay for it. That's going to cost you about $1,500, so be wary. It does use a storyboarding approach to design, which makes it a little bit easier to set up, but mechanically it's quite difficult. So there's a number of scenes here, and you can see here what I've got is a main slide, some options where that slide can take the user to if they do certain things. In this case, it's clicking on a certain option. And then there's a video scene that sits underneath it all. They're all separate things that have to be configured. I won't be spending much time talking about how I'm actually using these things. It's more just an example of the complexity that's required when you get to this level. So, scene 1's a video slide. It's called scene 1 because I did it first. No other reason. Scene 2, as I mentioned, is more complex. It's a series of separate slides, and its navigation is controlled from the one at the top by buttons and triggers on the text. And I'll show you a close-up version here, but essentially you've got the main slide and then optional pathways, very much like the PowerPoint presentation I talked about earlier. So here's the screen. The good thing is it's relatively easy to set up text on the screen. It's easy to set up these little talky parts, and it's easy to set up these little characters that sort of move around as you wish. And you can see there's lots and lots of controls that have to be considered here. So if you go to this slide here, you can trigger it to jump to a certain video scene, or if a person does a certain activity, like clicks on it with a mouse, it will do something. If they do something, if they double click on it, it will do something else. You've got a lot of control here, but it comes with a price of complexity. And you can basically make your way through designing every single element of this presentation. Note here, the characters moved around, so they've got one particular character. If you go up to the top here, you can see there's multiple characters. You can change their expression and their pose and their perspective. It just adds a little bit more of a personal flavour to these interactivity things that something like PowerPoint can't do. There we go, different characters. The controls, as you can see here, I've just basically cut and pasted a whole bunch of the toolbars which are available to you. You can see here this is not for someone who's not willing to dedicate a bit of time to it, and it's not for someone who's not going to engage with it continuously. You can imagine engaging with Articulate and then 3 months later trying to come back and do something to it. It will be problematic because you will forget a lot of the aspects to it. Okay, so that's just another scene. Storyline has a number of outputs. The ones that are directly relevant to schools might be the learning management system that it can go out to. So it might be Blackboard, or it might be Moodle, or it might be Canvas for the University of Adelaide. Note also that you can put it out onto CD or into a Word document, or just a web page if you wanted to. So it's quite versatile in terms of its outputs. Examples, there's an example here of using a coffee brewer. Just enables you to click on a few things here and tells you basically what you do at this particular point in time. Not very sophisticated, but visually quite attractive, nicely self-contained in a web browser page, and clearly has a purpose which is being implemented by it. It's a lot of effort to build this, but not probably as much as you might imagine once you know what you're doing. We've already talked about Teach'em with the using existing YouTube videos where you can add elements of quizzing throughout it. Designed the extra little level of interactivity. They're just getting people to pay a bit more attention to the YouTube videos after their minute or two of full attention wanes. So, good for self-paced instruction. It's easy to skip things you already know. It's good for case-based scenarios too, especially those which have got a visual element. So let's have a look at something like a skateboarder. So I want to see a few tricks, see how they're done. Just click on trick A, trick B and trick C, and you can see different outcomes of the skateboarder doing certain tricks. For something that's actually a little bit more demanding than just observing videos, you can actually have sort of little games built in. So this is from Wrapped Media, and the idea here is that there's been a crime committed. Obviously there's someone lying on the floor dead, but there's a photographer who might inspect the body, there might be a policeman who's going to interview witnesses, and essentially it's a choose your own adventure type of interaction built in Articulate. So this is a sort of level of interactivity that you might expect using the more upper-ended tools. We'll get to virtual reality and augmented reality later on in the course, and that's going to give you probably, at this stage, the ultimate interactions that we can possibly manage in an education environment.